tell that it's going to be weird for you because you have no one to look at.
Because I have no one to look at?
Yes, just stare deeply into my logo.
Oh, I'll just stare deeply into my camera.
Whatever works. It's like disconcerting usually, I'm sure. Welcome, everybody. So today I'm going to be interviewing Steve, and we've got a really awesome show for you. I'm really excited about this, and I'm just going to kind of let Steve tell his story of what he experienced in relation to Black Lives Matter, and I've got some questions. But Steve, why don't you tell everybody about your background in case they haven't met you at the coffee shop?
Okay, well, I'm a residential designer. I practice something weird called architecture, which is a specific philosophy of design. And I've spent a long time in civic activism, a lot of stuff on homeless housing, homeless issues, trafficking of sex workers, land use issues. And eventually that had me arrive on this advisory body to the Board of Supervisors called the Altadena Town Council. And I served at the town council for 20 years. I was the land use chairman twice. And in 2008, I kind of decided that was futile, so I quit all that. And 2013, I had a dual coronary bypass operation. I decided I was pretty much gonna, if I was gonna do activism, I was gonna do it differently than how I had done it because it was highly stressful. And no sooner was I recovering from that than some ladies from All Saints Church, which is a very activist church in Pasadena, called me in and really wanted me to go to this meeting about police abuse. And I was kind of dubious because the All Saints people and I really didn't get along because they're sort of a very clubbish group of activists, and I'm sort of not really a join the club kind of person, which is weird for an activist, but that's true. So go to this meeting and it's all about the death of Patrice Richardson. And Patrice, I had known Patrice. She was a Black woman who regularly came to my former coffee joint, the Coffee Gallery in Altadena. And Patrice didn't straighten her hair. I mean, Matrice didn't straighten her hair. And my best friend then, he's now dead, but my best friend Kevin Sutherland and I were on a mission to get Black women to stop straightening their hair. So I went up to Matrice and congratulated her on not straightening her hair. And she came and sat with us for coffee for a while. And every time she came into the Coffee Gallery, she'd come talk to us. And we only talked to her 4 or 5 times over about a year period. Very charming woman. The last time we talked to her, it was clear to both Kevin and I that she seemed to be kind of off her meds. And then 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, she was missing, and she came up dead several months later in Malibu. And that was a whole series of sheriff's misconduct. She had just graduated with her degree from university, and she went to this restaurant in Malibu called Goffrey's to celebrate. And don't know really what happened there, but she had a personal bill that was about $80, and her credit cards were in the car, but Goffrey's didn't want to let her go to the car. They called the sheriffs. They got her grandmother on the phone. The grandmother was willing to pay over the phone. They wouldn't take the phone payment from the grandmother. They took Matrice to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station.
Wow.
Then they let Matrice out allegedly at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, if you've ever been to Malibu, to the Lost Hills Sheriff Station area, there's no street lights. It's dark. Matrice was absolutely model, stunning, gorgeous, okay? Definitely like kind of, and the sheriffs admitted they thought she was having a psychological episode, but they didn't keep her. They just like allegedly let her out of the jail. And then a place where she was found. She was found up this canyon about 1.5 miles away from the sheriff's station. And the last house that you go to before you get to that canyon used to be a pornography boot camp where people were trained to do porn in Malibu. And, you know, it's very nefarious as to what happened to her. No one knows what happened to her. But then when they did finally find her body months later in an area where people had hiked a lot previously, when they did finally find her body, the sheriff's department botched the collection of the body. And, you know, everyone went to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris promised to investigate the sheriff's department and what happened and the series of mistakes and bad policies they made. And then after Harris got elected, she just kind of blew that whole thing off. And so anyway, so at this meeting, I met Patrice Cullors, who's one of the 3 organizers for Black Lives Matter. And, you know, the All Saints people were very key on introducing me to Patrice. I never did figure out what it was they thought I was going to do for Patrice or Patrice was going to do for me. I kept trying to figure it out. I figured since I was an old guy and Patrice was kind of young, since I had a lot of experience dealing with LA County, and since I had a lot of experience dealing with police abuse issues, that maybe I was supposed to mentor Patrice. Patrice really didn't think that I was capable as a white male of mentoring her, period, at all, zip. And so, you know, but I kept trying to figure out, because I kind of figured that this was sort of like some sort of divine appointment thing or something, because it was kind of so unnatural and so weird for us to meet. So I was like, okay. And so, you know, we kept meeting and I kept...
If you're concerned about the ongoing rolling crises that we've all been going through in the last months, you might be concerned about access to fresh food and being able to keep your immune system healthy. Now you can get secure access to fresh food no matter what is going on in the world with a food forest. The permaculture food forest offers the most food, water, and shelter of any habitat in the world. A permaculture food forest is an easy way to get deep nutrition in an otherwise toxic landscape. Whether your family's health is a concern or you're worried about rising food costs, this strategy session can help you. Get a food forest no matter what size your property is. Access to delicious, nutritious food is your birthright. Reclaim it. Where we'll meet is on the phone initially to determine whether it's a fit between us. We'll gather information about your property and you can ask us questions. What you'll gain is straightforward strategies to transform your property's issues into abundantly healthy and productive land that will feed you and your family indefinitely. The food forest has been recognized internationally as the most efficient land restoration and food production system in the world.
Trying to figure out, you know, what it was, what the purpose was for me to meet her. I was like, you know, because I knew that I just figured we were supposed to do some kind of work together somehow. And eventually, you know, she and I had a conversation down on Wilshire Boulevard at my favorite Brit bar. And she was talking about there was this foundation that wanted to like give her a bunch of money and they were going to like really blow up the movement. And I was saying, no, you don't want to do that, because, you know, when you do that, yeah, you get real big for a while, but eventually, you know, you're doing what the foundation wants, and eventually you lose credibility with the public, and you don't want to lose credibility with the public. You want to do the work. You know, Patrice kind of looked at me and she showed me a purse that she had that was a couple of years old. And she goes, look, man, I'm a diva. Mama needs a new purse and shoes. I was kind of like, I was really taken back by that, because, you know, activism has always cost me money. It never made me any money. So I really, yeah, I really can't understand people who think of it as a profession and a means towards wealth. Stupid me. So, you know, that kind of, I was kind of really put off by that, but we still sort of stayed friends on the internet, you know. And one time she sent me a message and said she had just started, you know, Black Lives Matter. It wasn't called Black Lives Matter before that. It was called Dignity and Power Now. And she, when Ferguson erupted, you know, she had this very long emotional email that she listed about, you know, Black Lives Matter. And I was the first All Lives Matter person. I kind of wrote back and I said, you know, and I was really crying when I read her post to think that, you know, Black people really feel in America that their lives don't matter. I mean, that was really devastating to me. And I wrote back while I was crying, I wrote back, you know, man, that's so hard, you know, like all lives matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. And she got really pissed that I said all lives matter. That like really pissed her off, and that pissed some of the other people off who were on the email. So I was the first all lives matter person, and I was the first person to get reamed for that. And then,
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just letting you roll because you're answering my questions before I can really ask them. This is why
okay.
I should never have sent you all my questions so you could see if I was asking anything that was even relevant.
Well, don't worry. We'll get there. And you know, like at one point she asked me if I knew about copyright law because people were making Black Lives Matter T-shirts and they weren't paying her any money and royalties on the T-shirts. So I explained to her how, you know, I had a line of clothing at one time years ago. So I explained to her how all that worked and how they had chopped up the copyright in very weird ways. So like you had to pay like money to copyright shirts, and that was separate from copywriting hats, and that was separate from copywriting mirrors, and they had like things arranged in very strange categories so that they could collect multiple fees from you. And then what happened is all the funding finally came in from this George Soros guy. And the first thing that happens when all the funding comes in is she hightails a plane to the West Bank and poses in a keffah, which is that hat, you know, that you see that looks sort of like that black and white design Arabic hat. And so she poses with like a machine gun and her raised fist and the communist salute, saying, you know, that there should be an end to the Zionist state and Jews should be removed from the Middle East and Zionism everywhere is a problem. I was, you know, she knew that like my mother is a Jew, right? So like I was like deeply hurt and offended that she would send that to me. And then she was all pissed off like half a day after that because Israeli security stopped her at the border. I'm like, well,
yeah.
You know?
Well, so pretty much what you had warned her about came true, that, you know, she was given all this money, and then of course the quote unquote foundation that gave her this money basically immediately wanted her to become become all about something totally unrelated to what she had originally wanted to have a group for.
Well, I'm not sure that I used to believe that. I'm not sure that that's correct. I'm not really sure what her main purpose was or what her purposes were. I'm not sure if she was an anti-Semite before Soros funded her or if she took that on after she got the funding. I really don't know.
Yeah, well, and you know, some of the conversations that I've seen online are people saying, well, you know, you can't prove that it's Soros. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you was because you've got personal experience, and I really think that personal direct experience with all manner of phenomena, whether they be human or otherwise, is really valuable, and it adds to the you know, range of evidence that we have. And so this is a great story, and we're just kind of getting started.
There's no doubt that a large tranche of the original big money that came into Black Lives Matter was from Soros. Now, you know, with Bank of America recently promising to give them $1 billion, I don't know if he forms the majority of the money that they have now or not. I really can't say.
Well,
other people I know are reading into their books, but I'm not.
Yeah, well, okay, so in doing research for this, and I mentioned this just real briefly at the very beginning, I do keyword research and web development and SEO and all that kind of stuff. And so I always try to do some keyword research for my videos so people who are interested in the topic can find us, you know, and that kind of thing. So I did some research and I found a keyword related to ActBlue. And for those of you who don't know, ActBlue is the actual identity of BLM. It's basically a shell
corporation. Not exactly. It's a financial agent through which the funds that go to BLM are poured. And there are several of these. I don't know if this is specifically a California one, but in the not-for-profit world, you know, it's very expensive to set up a not-for-profit. And so at the beginning, a lot of not-for-profits have this kind of agent relationship with another not-for-profit. My friend Eric Lloyd Wright, who had Right Way Organic Resource Center, for example, which was all about architecture and the land and stuff. He had a not-for-profit that was actually under the umbrella of this other Malibu not-for-profit called C, and I forget what it's, something environmental entrepreneurs. And so that's how that works, and that's legal under the law. What's really strange about Black Lives Matter is they've been around now for a long time. They've raised a lot of money, and they've never become a separate 501c3, and that's extremely unusual for an organization with the amount of money that they have.
Yes, I knew there was something there, and thank you for clarifying that. That's great to have that expertise. Okay, so I looked up ActBlue and was just looking up, you know, I just randomly actually just chose one of the URLs that came up as ranking for the term that I'm going to use.
Right.
And I hunted around a bit on their website and I found their list of contributions. Now it's interesting, they're kind of hiding it because on the very front page, it's like, you know, it says, we didn't make any contributions to any candidates in 2020. And then they happen to also not show 2019 because they jump every 2 years for some reason. So you're like, oh, this is all a lie. They didn't donate anything. But if you dig a little, you get into another page where it says contributions. And on the top line, at over $1 billion, $1,057,598,402 to be exact, are contributions to federal candidates. And then it goes down from there with contributions to committees and national parties and joint fundraising committees and state.
But you have to understand, ActBlue has several other not-for-profits under it, not just Black Lives Matter.
They actually also fund as well. I understand that too.
Yeah. So it could be that Black Lives Matter actually gave no money to candidates, but ActBlue gave $1 billion to candidates. Now, ActBlue, a lot of people say that ActBlue is one of the many slush funds that feeds campaign money directly into the Democratic Party. And actually, when you donate money to Black Lives Matter, a portion of that goes off as the operating expenses, and then ActBlue very often will donate that to Democratic Party candidates.
And I just want to say, this is really funny. I had seen this the other day, and one of the things about Twitter, is, you know, it's like here today, gone tomorrow, and there's a lot of retweeting, but like some things can get lost. And I'm a fan of I keep bringing stuff back at that right perfect moment, you know. It's one of my favorite things to do. And one thing that you just said is calling them a Democratic Party, and I'm not trying to correct you in any way, but I'm using this as an example. Someone had said, like, we can't call them that. That's not what they are. They're the Democrat Party. And in fact, this reminds me, and I wish I could, I'm going to try to get this video because it's so funny. It's so good, where they showed all the screenshots. I was talking about this the other day of all they're actually videos. Somehow they put a bunch of little videos in a big video, which I don't know how to do. And they lined it all up so you could hear, like, you know, 18 different news stations are supposed to be different local stations with a diversity and a lack of monopoly in the news. And they're all repeating the phrase, this is a threat to our democracy, you know, because of course the demon, one of its main symptoms, or one of the ways you can tell that it's a demon, is it projects. It blames its victim or its target for what it's doing to the victim or the target.
Right.
So that was just a little thing I wanted to bring up because I'm going to try to slip
I call them the Democratic Party because that's what they call themselves. I call transgender people whatever it is the gender is that they say they are. Because,
and
I feel that's polite. I mean, it may not even be accurate according to some people, but it's just polite.
Well, and I think too, Steve, like it's going to be really nice to have this conversation unfold because you're coming from the perspective of having direct personal experience with some of these people that someone like me or maybe some other activists, we've never even met the person. I don't even know what she looked like. So you have that human element of having that, you kind of understand a different side of some of these things. And that's one of the reasons I'm interested in having you share your story, so that my listeners can see, like, not that it's wrong to have the judgment some of us have, but just to kind of hear from direct experience. I mean, it's fascinating. So to get you back around to kind of where you were at, you had met this person and she was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. It sounds like she was maybe the founder. Yeah. And
one of the three, and she was really sort of the three of them, she was kind of the spear point of action in the early days, although she kind of like has taken a little bit of a backseat because she's also a performance artist and she's doing her performance art career too.
Well, and yeah, she's probably pretty well funded for that as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
With the donations. So I want to focus kind of more on going forward. I want to kind of focus on the meeting that you were invited to, and I think there was a lot of twists and turns.
Okay, I wasn't invited to this meeting. This is a Board of Supervisors meeting. These happen at 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning. Okay.
Yeah,
and I've gone to these things for decades because I was on the town council, so I would show up, and I hadn't been to a board meeting in probably 2 or 3 years. And one day I thought, I should really just go down and just see what they're up to. It was like shortly before Christmas, and that's kind of like when they do all their evil. If you really want to know, if you really, really want to know what evil, rotten things your city is going to do to the populace, they do the really awful, rotten things in the meeting closest to December, right? Closest to Christmas, right before Christmas, and then the meeting right after New Year's, okay? That's when they do all the really crappy stuff. So if you want to find out.
Because like people aren't really paying attention, they're all
paying attention, they don't show up, they have better things to do, they're in that holiday mood, and who the hell, when you're working on Christmas or Hanukkah, who wants to go to a political meeting, at 9 a.m. in the morning and be there till 2 in the afternoon, right?
Right.
I mean, their right mind wants to do that. That's why only us activists go.
Right.
And so, so I went down to go to that, and another person I know who's another activist, Jasmine Canick. Jasmine was down there. She's also a Black woman. And she and Patrice had just gotten the measure qualified on the ballot, and it was amazing because they took the papers out to qualify it, and everyone thought it would take them months. And through their kind of extended network, they very silently, without anyone even knowing that they were having a lot of success, got all the signatures they needed for this thing, and they got it on the ballot.
What was what was it for?
It was a measure we passed 2 years ago at the election cycle, and it was one of the taxes that helps fund mental health services for homeless people.
Okay.
And so anyway, I don't know if you've ever been to a Board of Supervisors meeting, but it's like it starts at 9, and they have an endless parade of Pravda-like announcements and awards they give out, and then the public speaks, and you can sit there for hours, and they let you speak for a whole minute, And I always, whenever I speak or don't speak, I always stay for the whole meeting, because if you just leave, you can miss some really rotten things they're doing to you, right? So I stayed, so I had a lot of time. So I wrote Patrice a card, congratulating her, because she was, even though I was kind of like ticked off at her, she's, we had been friends and we had worked together a little bit on some stuff. So, I always try to stay friendly. I stay friendly even with people who are my opposition. I find it's easier to do that with Republicans and Democrats, but we could go into that some other time. But anyway, so, I made a card and I stuffed it in an envelope. And at the end of the meeting, and I wasn't dressed in my black architecture. I was dressed in, button-down shirt, khaki pants, blue blazer, striped khaki and blue tie, right? And Oxford wingtip shoes. And I think I looked to a lot of people like a 1920s cartoon of a capitalist, right? Plus I had my briefcase. So when I walked up to Patrice and I handed her this envelope, and I spoke to her and Jasmine very briefly. And as I was leaving, a couple guys said, hey, you, wait up. I was like, yeah, can I help you? And they thought that I was like the guy who was paying them. And they said, hey, you know, we're coming here to like every meeting, every week, and we're here like half a day, and all we get is like a bus ride to and from our location and a bologna sandwich and $40. And we need a raise because like we're working for the people. Now, I got to tell you, in this I was stunned and angry at the same time, because whenever I go down to a Board of Supervisors meeting, I pay $20 for parking. Now it's 24. I
Wow.
get no lunch, right? And I take half a day off work. So it like costs me about $350 to go down there, and I don't get lunch, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
so, and they're going like, you know, now these are people who are telling me that their lives are being existentially threatened by the police, right? But they are only getting $40 a meeting to go down there, and they need a raise. And so we went round and round. I kept denying to them that I was the bag man. They kept insisting I was. And finally, I kind of thought to myself, you know, I want to go home. I haven't had anything to eat. If I just tell these guys I'm going to give them a raise, they'll let me go. So,
Yeah.
so I kind of looked down at my shoes, and I kind of like fidgeted a little bit. And I said, you know, guys, you're really right. You're really fighting for the people. And tell Patrice I said, you know, next meeting you guys get $100 and we'll get you a better lunch.
So this is great, and I love that this actually happened to you, and this is what made me want to do this interview, because okay, I know that we all have varying levels of exposure and information and perspectives and all of that. So I kind of try to be like a little bit of a baseline or a foundation, and to help us be on the same page, no matter where we're coming from. And so, you know, you might be really familiar if you're watching this with Black Lives Matter or the riots, you know, or you might be just totally new to this. So just to kind of catch us all up on the same page here, what I found striking about this was that it showed that the BLM was a group of people who were lobbying. They were paid lobbyists. Now that struck me as very different from the perception that I had been given of them, that had been handed to me, and that the, you know, I call them left wing nut friends that I have, maybe not friends, as acquaintances. Some of them are left wing nuts, and some of them are just left. But
I'm a leftist, you know.
Exactly, which is why I say that you're not a wing nut. And so, but anyway, so you know, some of the people that I know that are sympathetic to the Black Lives Matter think that it's a bunch of, like you said, like they're going through this existential threat. It's systemic racism, all these buzzwords and these, you know, these repeated, hypnotically repeated phrases.
But you know, there is systemic racism. I mean,
yeah, but
about that.
Yes, and I've always been I've always been really, really sympathetic to people of color. It's just in my nature. But what I'm interested in here is that this is not. This is kind of like it's basically a conspiracy. And you know, you mentioned Soros. The thing, I think the core of this is that yes, there's an organization of people who, and maybe it's not an organization, maybe it's not Black Lives Matter, because I know that they spike in trends right before every election. So
right,
okay,
right.
But there is a group of people. There is racism. Yes, I'm not saying there isn't. What I'm kind of interested in exposing here is that, you know, all these people are saying, oh, it's a peaceful protest, and you know, and Pelosi's out there like, Trump is a dictator. He's taking our rights away, and he's attacking peaceful citizens, and like that. No, there's violent, deadly riots going on. Hundreds
Well, you know,
of people
I'm an old guy.
and yeah,
I'm an old guy, and I was young. I was very young in the 1960s, but I was like awake. You know, like a lot of my friends my age, they don't remember like 1968 at all. And I was very, very awake. I was a news junkie from the time I was 4, I think my parents say.
4.
Yeah, well, I debated I wanted to debate in preschool the Kennedy-Nixon debates. It's a famous family story. Anyway, so you know, I was a news junkie from ever since anyone can remember, and so I really remember like the protests of 1968 when Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy got assassinated.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember Kent State and all that other kind of stuff. And what amazes me about Donald Trump, and it really freaks me out because it's so not who I think he is as a human being, is that he has yet to roll the tanks. I mean, my God, if it was Richard Nixon or LBJ, the National Guard, whether the mayor or the governor said yes or not, the National Guard would have been deployed to Portland weeks ago, and they would have shut all this stuff down.
Yeah, and
I'm really freaked out by actually how totally non-totalitarian Trump is.
exactly. That's exactly the point. He's being made out to be. And in fact, one of the quotes that Q said once that I really like was, "They never thought she would lose." I think that's the whole thing. They put him in this position so that he would react, because they just assume that he's like them. But
Right.
He's very different than they are. And when I say they, I'm talking about like the deep state, which has most likely infiltrated Black Lives Matter. I don't think necessarily Black Lives Matter and your friend is like this evil group of people, but I think they have been potentially manipulated and infiltrated in some way based on.
Well, no. You know, the Black Lives Matter Los Angeles coordinator, Melina Abdullah. Melina is a third generation communist organizer. Okay. Her grandfather was this guy named Reichman. Now, Reichman was not really his family name. There was a very wealthy German family named Reichman. And so he took on the nom de plume and eventually took it on as his name. His last name is Reichman. And he wrote communist literature in the interwar period. So in the Weimar Republic, he wrote communist literature. And you know, the Antifa emblem?
Yeah.
Okay, that actually was a 1920s, 1930s communist emblem, and he was a part of that. Okay, so he was a communist, eventually comes to America, his son is a communist, and then that guy's daughter, Melina Abdullah, is a communist. So you've got like a third generation communist ideologue as the LA coordinator for Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so it's okay to be a conspiracy theorist a little bit here. I was trying to walk delicately, so you're going to have to just let me know if I step on toes and offend you in any way, because you know these people personally, and
I don't offend easily.
Well, that's good. Well, usually I it's all good, but I'm sensitive to the fact that you knew these people personally, and I don't want to.
I know these people, and I like them. It's just I don't like some of what they're doing. So.
Well, yeah, and I mean, my purpose is to expose and inform and help empower the resistance, because what I see is a very serious and very dangerous insurrection and invasion from within, and I it's pretty scary. And so I skipped over a question that I think is kind of important to help people see, and I don't mean to say like, were they Black? That's really not what I'm asking, but my original question is, what did they look like? What were their ages? The people who showed up to this planning, this Board of Supervisors.
The county meeting? The people showed up to the county meeting? Well, that was kind of fascinating too. There were a lot of single moms with children in tow who were in their 20s and 30s. They were mostly Black, okay? There's a smattering of Black males who were 30-ish. There's one guy who I think is maybe Patrice's boyfriend. I'm not sure, but he always shows up at like everything. He has long dreadlocks, and I can't remember his name. I apologize. But so there were very, very few Black men, and there were a lot of Latinos, and not as many Latin women, but there were a lot of Latino guys. The majority of the men who were there, who were with them, were Latino.
How old were the Latino men in general? What were their ages?
20, 30 something. I mean, when you're my age, everybody under 45 looks like they're a child,
Okay, and that really helps us see, and that really contrasts with some of the things I've seen, all the videos and stuff where there are these Black Lives Matter protests with all these signs, Black Lives Matter, and they're chanting, they're yelling at the cops, etc. And they're all white, and there's maybe one Black person in a sea of white people.
That's Antifa.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's the thing is, in certain ways, BLM and Antifa, they're kind of, it's like they're, I don't know if if Antifa infiltrated BLM or, you know,
No,
but
no, 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 no. They're both owned by Soros. They're or controlled by Soros. They're basically, you know, sub corporations of the same corporation, right? So it's like I don't know. Johnson Wax owns Lemon Pledge. I don't know if they do, but let's say they do, and then they also own Handy Wipes or something, and they both show up at the same place, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's
And
kind of like how it is with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. You know, they're both funded out of the same place. They both have the same organizer training. You know, their organizer training is some of it's done directly by Soros's groups. Some of it's done by unions. But they all have kind of the same training base, the same dogmatic base.
yeah,
And Antifa is primarily, you know, Patrice, it was very unusual, I think, that she worked with me at all. She really doesn't want to work with white people.
yeah.
She's got this thing about white saviors, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, whatever, you know. I'm not going to force you to make me volunteer for you, you know.
Well, okay, so that's really awesome that you just came out and said that. I really want to see if we can get down to the bottom of where you found out that Soros is funding BLM and that BLM and Antifa are basically working together and working for Soros and getting the same training, et cetera. Because that is a gold mine, basically. And I'd love to hear what is your source? You know, what gave you that idea? Where'd you get that information?
Well, I got that direct from Patrice. I mean, she told me who was funding her. I'm like, oh, okay.
Awesome.
So, I mean, you know, she told me what foundation was funding her, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that's that guy. Great.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. That's really
So,
helpful.
yeah. So that, I mean, that was like not a question. And
Yeah.
you know, it's funny because you can find that in the returns and stuff. And I mean, you can find that, for example, various of Soros's. My buddy Kevin Lynn like did the research and tied it all up. But basically, Patrice over a couple of years got about $300,000 personally from Soros things, and actually Melina got a little bit more. And I think really a lot of that money, though, they do not. I honestly think they do not spend the majority of that money on themselves or not living large, any of that kind of stuff. I think most of that money is really going to the people who are getting their like peanut butter and jelly sandwich and their bus ride and their $40 a meeting.
Right, and that's really okay. So that that brings me right back to the main point of this whole thing, and that is, you know, okay, for this group of people, they thought that you were the money guy because of your nice shoes and your briefcase, and that you handed an envelope to
No, looks
Patrice.
Caucasian, yeah.
And you're, yeah, I mean, you know, it was a perfect storm, really. Now, what were those people asking the Board of Supervisors for? That is key. That is really key, because now we've established that these people actually work directly for Soros, and we know this because Patrice, leader of BLM, told you that firsthand.
Well, she told me that was who was funding them. She didn't say they worked for him.
Well,
but, you know,
I think you can kind of, I mean,
it's about a distinction, but I want to be absolutely clear.
Fair enough. But I think all of us can, you know, we're not naive. We can make
right. But I want to make clear that, you know,
yes,
not the other. And
okay, so yeah,
which initiative? You know, I honestly don't remember. I've been down to the Board of Supervisors several times when BLM or Dignity and Power Now, which she still has that organization, so they sort of flow together seamlessly. When they were presenting, and I don't really remember which thing, but I mean, generally it's pretty much some kind of an accountability program for the Sheriff's Department. And the funny thing about that is there is nothing that the Board of Supervisors would love more than to have more direct authority over the sheriff than the state law allows them to have.
Why is that?
Huh?
Why is that?
Oh, because the Sheriff's Department costs them a fortune in payouts. I mean, millions upon millions of dollars every year in payouts because of unlawful, unconstitutional activities in the jail, you know, beating up on inmates, making inmates fight each other while they're betting on them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all kinds of just really disgusting crap that the Sheriff's Department has done and gotten nailed for, and that the county has had to pay out for. and yet the county really has no direct oversight over the sheriff. Like
Okay, so essentially there's a little bit of bad on both sides, it sounds like. Now, I want to get back to the thing that you had told me and what I really want to cover in this interview, that they were there to lobby, and that the last 3 months that you'd been going to the meetings, and that day that I saw you at the coffee shop, and we talked about doing this interview, and you were going to go to that meeting and you didn't make it. After that, what did the board of supervisors vote on? They voted to defund the police.
They voted
LA
to defund
County.
the sheriff. Yeah, and that's mostly been Jasmine Canick, although Jasmine doesn't really work the public side of that street. She does a lot of behind the scenes organizing of kind of church people, sort of more reputable black people than the young semi-employed folks, you know, and Melina together. So that's been Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and Jasmine working in concert to do that. And Patrice hasn't really done much of the work on that issue. I mean, she does come and speak, and of course that is something she's in favor of, but really the ground organizing on that has been Melina Abdullah and Jasmine Canick.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, I think that this is really, really a big issue, because one thing that I've been tracking is how these people like Pelosi and Newsom, Newsom is, you know, he's been saying he wants to release 18,000 felons into the population. Okay, there's obviously many things wrong with that just on its own without any kind of qualifiers. But then there's also this concurrent initiative that is, you know, can't just be a coincidence, can it? Where it's like, let's also defund our police who would be able to protect us from felons attacking us who've been released into the, it's like, wait a minute, well, what's going on here?
What's going on here is that Soros, and you know, I want to be very careful when I say this, because I do not know that Patrice or Melina or Jasmine or anyone associated with Black Lives Matter either believes this is the truth or has any knowledge that this is the truth or has been openly engaged to do this. But George Soros makes all of his money on sociological national destruction. He made a fortune, literally doubled his fortune by causing a run on the English pound. He literally destroyed Greece. He destroyed Hungary. There are warrants for him in several countries because he's used his Open Society Foundation and groups that foundation funded. He's used those to cause gigantic social dislocations, and he bets in various ways against the resulting chaos and profits from that. So what you have with Soros is you have the world's probably last remaining Nazi collaborator who is like an international capitalist who's using the left and communists to cause sociological and societal destruction that he's then profiting off of.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like I was just actually doing another show. I was working on another show kind of about this, where, you know, there's this idea that you know, it's just basic advertising. You create a problem, and then your product will solve this new problem that people didn't even know they had before your product was there to fix it. And it's exactly what that is. It's, let's create a bunch of chaos, and then we'll swoop in.
So one of the things that I think they want to do, and how I think this is going to play out, because this is how it played out in Hungary, is they're going to release prisoners out of the jails. They're going to defund the police. There's going to be less police to protect the citizenry, and there's already too few in Los Angeles.
You are about to discover how you can profit from the greatest wealth transfer in the history of mankind, and how you can protect your family from the coming economic collapse that's happening on a global scale all around us right now. Our company has created the world's first gold and silver home-based business opportunity. We're one of the very first entrepreneurs in the world to see this opportunity, and for a limited time, we would like to offer you you a free silver bullion bar and info pack just for taking the time to watch our short wealth transfer webinar on the inside of this website. Right now, silver is on the verge of exploding in value. So as you can imagine, we simply can't have an offer like this available for very long. I can guarantee you have never seen a wealth creating opportunity like this before in your entire career. And the information in this short webinar could change the course of your family's financial future forever. So what are you waiting for? Enter your information in the form on this page to claim your free silver.
Honestly. And then what happens is people take up arms themselves to protect themselves. And then what happens, oddly enough, is the Open Society Foundation, whenever someone fires on one of these criminals, the Open Society Foundation pays for the lawyers to sue the person who's firing on the criminals.
Wow.
So this will cause people then to like be afraid to even protect themselves.
Is that what happened with those two people who were on their front lawn? Okay, this
Sort
gets
of.
me.
Now that's very interesting because that was a Soros financed DA. Soros financed the election of that DA.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah. So it was that.
And
That's
he's
exactly
been
what I
doing
was
that all
thinking.
over the country. He's been financing. Because he discovered, you know, you can like put like $1 or $2 million into a DA race and own the DA, right? And he's doing that right now. He and Black Lives Matter and Abdullah and a bunch of other people are trying to get this Gascon character elected to replace Jackie Lacey. Now, I have no love for Jackie Lacey. I think Jackie Lacey has not been a good DA when it comes to equal justice, even though she's a black woman. I think she has been too slow to prosecute corrupt politicians and corrupt cops. Having said all that, the Gascon guy that they want to replace her with is a total societal disaster. He's the guy who was the DA in San Francisco for the last several years. He's the guy who decriminalized taking heroin on the street. He's the guy who decriminalized defecating and urinating on the street. He's the guy who decriminalized public nudity in San Francisco. So, you know, all of this stuff that's led to just a societal crash in San Francisco to the point where people will no longer even book conventions there, even before COVID.
Wow.
That's all the marvelous work of George Gascon. That's the guy who Black Lives Matter want to have as the DA who's going to replace Jackie Lacey. It's insane. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's all there, and it's so weird to me that there's this huge rift between the country. There's the people who watch the mainstream media's version and total lies and spin and projection, and then there's people who like do a little research on their own and have conversations like this and know that what's really going on is these people who are blaming, you know, Trump and everybody else for this bad stuff, they're actually the ones doing it. And what I'm really interested in is where it's all going. And I think it is definitely, they're trying to take down the Constitution, and they're trying, this is like a big, it's a big invasion.
Absolutely. You know, they hate the Constitution. There are people in America, and, you know, I don't know if we call them the Illuminati or the Freemasons. Actually, if you see a group and you can name a group, that's a front group, because whoever the conspiracy is that's doing all this, they're behind whatever it is that you see in front.
I totally agree. That's what my book's about.
Well, that's amazing. And so whoever these people are, of course, you know, I happen to be a Christian, so I believe the ultimate conspirator against the American Constitution is Lucifer himself.
Yes.
But whoever, you know, these folks are, they've hated the Constitution. They don't really hate the Constitution. They're okay with the Constitution until we get to the Bill of Rights. They hate the Bill of Rights. They hate the idea that all men really are equal, that all men really are self-empowered, that all men really are self-actualized. You know, they'll tell you that the founders were crap because they didn't get rid of their slaves immediately. On and on and on and on and on. You know, they'll say the Second Amendment is all about catching and killing slaves. That's total bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and it's clear in the Federalist Papers that, you know, the Second Amendment is about if this government ever becomes like George III was, we're going to take it out. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, they're really clear about that. It doesn't have anything to do with slavery.
And it's fascinating that it's such a total hypocrisy and irony, and that's one of the reasons I don't get why more people have woken up. Maybe they have, I don't know. I know that the mainstream media would want us to believe they haven't. But
No, I think there's a lot more people who are awake than we really realize. They just, the radicals are so strident. They've made it so uncomfortable for just normal people to say, "Oh, I support Trump," or, "I'm really for Black equality, but I don't understand this Black Lives Matter stuff," or "I don't understand the stridency," or "I don't understand the hatred," or "I don't understand at this moment in American history why they're saying this," because while things are not perfect for Black people, they're certainly better than they've been any time since in America, any time since 1619.
yeah,
So, it's, I think
like so blatant.
people, yeah, well, and it's strange because I had these conversations, people know that they can sort of trust me, that like I'm a leftist, I'm not like some insane racist, George Wallace supporter or some bullshit. And so like, they'll like talk to me. And you'd be amazed the number of people who are really not happy with the evening news. They know something's wrong. They know something's really not right about the coronavirus. They can't really quite put their finger on it. They know that there's something to Black Lives Matter, that it's not really quite what it seems like it is. A lot of them, I was talking to an African-American friend of mine today who I cannot name because what he said to me would be very dangerous for him. And
Okay.
he does not support Kamala Harris.
Neither do
President. Well, no, and
political, but she scares me.
well, Kamala. I don't know Kamala personally, but I've watched her from afar, and there's no center moral position except her own personal power that she holds.
That's a valuable observation. Thank you for sharing that, because that's I can tell you're the type of person who thinks and you observe and you get involved and you're an activist like me, but you do it in your way and I do it my way, which we all do our own way. And it's fantastic because it all contributes to the whole. But, I was noticing just in the very short time I've paid attention to this person, Kamala Harris, that she not only did she called Biden a predator, but now she's now she's joined him and she stopped calling him a predator. And now she's saying he's a good guy. And it's like, well, where did that all go? Did you have a nice conversation and work it out? And then the big thing was, I found out that she
sniffed her hair.
Yeah, he probably just sniffed her hair and then they were fine. But no, then she didn't prosecute any of the priests who raped all the little boys. All those priests were sent to other countries. If you guys don't know this, you might, but I'm going to say it. They got shipped to other countries to go rape other little boys instead of being
okay because they were brown little boys.
Yeah, they were like
got shipped to Latin America and the Philippines, so
yeah,
it's okay.
They were little boys of color, so that's okay. And that goes back to this whole hypocrisy of race. And like, if these people that we call the people that are they're the baddies at the very bottom, we're not saying who they are yet, right? I know who they are, and that's what my book is about. But these people, they're the ones behind Soros and all that, right? So if they're trying to say they hate the Bill of Rights, right, because it is going to make it basically.
Well, they'll never say that, but they do.
Well, you're right. I sort of misspoke. They're not trying to say that. They're basically, their actions are speaking for them, but they're not coming out, and they're obviously saying the opposite of that. They're trying to say that that Trump's a racist and all this stuff. Radical right wingers,
totalitarian.
But it's them. It's these radical leftists that are the ones. Not everyone.
They're not even radical leftists. I mean, I'm a radical leftist, right?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Yeah,
I don't recognize what these people are about. It's like I can't. How did you go from where I thought we were together to this lust that you have for complete dominance over other people's lives? I mean,
yes.
Okay, yes, I want universal health care. I do. I want free university for all citizens. Notice I said all citizens. I want equal enforcement of the law. You know, I want black people to not be harassed by the police when they're driving in my neighborhood, just like I'm not. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what I want. That makes me a leftist, they tell me. But what these people want is complete, absolute dominance and control over every single aspect of your life, to the point where you can't breathe as a human being or think a thought that's different than theirs. And they get infuriated at the thought that you could think differently from that.
Yeah.
How
No,
is that freedom?
It's fascism. I mean, it's that's the funny thing is they're calling themselves anti-fascist, and they're saying that Trump and everybody that isn't part of their group is a fascist. And it's like, no, you're the fascist. You're the ones that are just you're beating people up and hurting them if they don't do what you want. You're shutting. I mean, all the statues they took down of people who were against slavery, and then you just said it. It was the best thing ever. We hate the Bill of Rights. What is the Bill of Rights? It said all people are created equal. Well, if they're
that's the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. Oh, Bill of Rights. Sorry, this is my age showing, and your wise knowledge trumping mine. So I'll shut up. But
well, no. I mean, it's freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to be secure in your person and property without, undue warrant, all that sort of stuff. You have to have a warrant to come search my stuff. Search and seizure clause. It's those things. Those things are the minimum. They're the absolute minimum that you have to have for a free society, right? And these radical folks, I can't call them the radical left because I don't know what they are. They're just radical. These crazy people, they want to get rid of the right to free speech. They want to get rid of your right to own a gun. Although, did you see that the Ninth Circuit today abolished California's high round magazine round law. So you can have high number magazines now, above 10. They said it was an infringement on the fundamental right to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, pretty awesome.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I did see that earlier. This goes back to the history of the Black Panther Party. I had found out about that in college, and I was just blown over. I was blown away by it, bowled over by it. I just was like, are you kidding me? They were being murdered in their beds by corrupt police. And I think it's important to say
it's deeper than that. White people in particular don't talk about this, and black people don't talk about it much either. But there's a war in the black community between the genders, and this is part of the Willie Lynch letter or strategy, right? And the master kind of set black women and black men at war with each other. And so there's no loyalty there, which makes nation building extremely difficult. And like in the case of Freddie Hampton, his girlfriend had like some minor prior arrest. And basically the cops told her that if she didn't give all the men in this house sedatives, right, and put it in their food, that they were going to take her children away from her and put her in jail, right? So she didn't go back to the headquarters and tell everybody. She put the sedatives in the food, and so that's why Hampton and the rest of the guys didn't jump up when the police came and grabbed their guns and defend themselves. They had been sedated.
Holy moly! So
that all came out in the 70s. That stuff all came out as a result of Watergate. So that's like old news. But
well, and I was born in '74, so I was probably not really paying attention at that point.
It's just a spring chicken.
Yes. So youthful. But you're still getting at my, the point of my book and the things that I really want to dive in and explore, because I definitely see there is an underlying thing that's connecting all of this. It's not just two separate things. I definitely see that you're taking away, they want to take away all of our rights. They want to try to say that the one person who's standing up to them since Kennedy is the one taking away our rights. It's a malicious evil. You said it earlier that you think it's Lucifer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think you are onto something there. That's basically what I'm not a Christian. I'm not a religious person. I'm a very spiritual person though, and I've had a lot of really interesting experiences with some of my other shows. I kind of share some of those stories. But I definitely think there is a demonic, satanic element to all of this, and it's interesting, a lot of the Q stuff, it's, I guess the Q team is Christian, and they show a lot of depictions of like, this is a spiritual war, and this is, sort of like Christ against Satan, and I understand what they're saying there. I think that that's basically the same thing. I really think that's what it is. These people are, there's something else. They're not normal.
I've had a fascinating experience in the last couple months because all my friends who are spiritual on any basis at all, like who are like New Age or Hindu or Jewish or Zoroastrian, they've all come to the same conclusions about like how COVID is being manipulated and the grab for state power. And I'm amazed by that because I really didn't think that people in different spiritual strains would see that, and they've all seen that, and they all see that it's being manipulated by the fundamental evil spiritual power of the universe.
Yes, exactly. That's kind of it. It's like, and I don't really see, personally, I don't think there's a fundamental evil of the universe, but that doesn't really matter. It's sort of like, whatever you're.
Well, you're wrong, but that's okay.
And that's okay. I can agree. See, I have the ability to disagree with people and not like start attacking them.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
No, but I really think that we're onto something here, is that these people, and that's really one of the reasons I appreciated the things you had to say about your personal experience with some of these people who belong to BLM, even one of the founders, because it really helped to kind of show the facets of the crystal of that this is not just like BLM is evil. I've never thought that. I've always thought they're infiltrated by like Antifa. So I like how you kind of clarified from what you had seen directly that they're both working for, or no, I shouldn't say working for, they're both being paid by the same
paid by, and at some point, certainly Soros has got influence in some of the people he sends. Sometimes the most powerful organization and the most powerful person in the organization is not the CEO, it's the CEO's secretary.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about Soros, because we've kind of covered we've covered all the the stuff around him, and I think that the stuff that I've seen in my I know that it's not complete, but it's what I'm exposed to and what I've come across is nobody's actually kind of come out and been like definitively, here's proof it was Soros, he's definitely funding, we know. So this is really great that we're
no. There's that's been run down. It's his Open Society Foundation's, one of their sub foundations has sent money to BLM, and that's not a secret. That's been out in the open for 2-3 years now. So that's.
But what you said earlier though about his like agenda, like he's got this, and I personally, when I was back in high school was when I kind of started thinking this. I asked the question, I'm like, well, why are these people doing these crazy, stupid things that they're doing, right? And they would always say, oh, it's greed. Like in debate class, the teacher would, oh, it's greed. And I'm like, no. Why are they greedy? What is making them greedy? This isn't a natural thing. Well, once you have a certain amount of money, you're not happier after you get more. There's like, what is his deal, man? What do you think his deal is, Steve?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Soros, you have to take some history of the guy. His father was raised in a very prominent Jewish family, and his father's family were very well respected rabbis and cantors, and which in the Jewish community in Eastern Europe, that was as high as you could go, right? And his father decided he was an atheist and he was going to disavow being a Jew, right? So he changed the family name, so the family name was no longer a Jewish name. He was heavy into this sort of made-up language that was very popular in the 20th century amongst intellectuals called Esperanto, and it was supposed to be an amalgamation of all the languages known on the earth so that kind of everyone could speak it. It was going to be new one world language, right? And so Soros's father was heavy into this whole one unified world, and that there was going to be a unified world government, and that this was going to be peace and love and Bobby Sherman, and everyone was going to be happy. And then
Interesting.
Soros's father kind of flees because the Nazis are coming, and he's identifiable as a Jew related to this very famous rabbinical family. George gets left with this guy who's a very high Nazi, right? And this very high Nazi is George's protector and mentor, right?
Oh my God.
And George actually talks about this in 60 Minutes. You can find the video where he talks about this. So it's like, I'm not saying anything that's hidden or hard to find. In fact, Soros wrote an autobiography that I read when I was 16. He wrote this autobiography where he talks about, you know, being a hidden Jew under this guy's tutelage. And basically his job became, because his father had helped people hide their wealth who were Jews and other ethnic undesirables in the Nazi racial hierarchy. So Soros knew where people's money was, where their wealth was, where their art was, where their jewelry was, right? Where their stock certificates were. And when Soros's protector was interviewing these people, Soros would be there and tell him if they were lying and where the rest of the stuff was. So these little Nazi assholes could go get it. Now, that's the kind of guy George Soros is. He betrayed his own people to the Nazis. And, you know, because of that, he had a much more comfortable life. I mean, he didn't go to Birkenau, right? He didn't perish in the camps, unfortunately. He's still alive today because of his betrayal of his people. This is the guy who's funding Black Lives Matter. This is the guy who's funding Antifa. This is the guy who's funding tons and tons of immigration groups, pro-immigration groups. This is the guy who's funding groups that are encouraging people to take their factories overseas out of the United States. That's who this guy is. He's the guy who will sell out his father's friends and his people so that he gets a better sandwich. That's who he is. He's not ashamed of it. He said on 60 Minutes he wasn't ashamed of it. It was either us or them, and he didn't care. And, you know, and that's how his life in finance is too. You know, it's some people suffer. He doesn't care, you know, because he does good things with the money eventually, or what he thinks are good things with the money eventually. That's who he is. We have to understand that he's a sociopath.
There you go. Yeah.
And he's one of the major philanthropists in the world. Is this Nazi collaborator, capo, sociopath? A capo is a Jew who worked in the camps against their own people. It's a very big insult to the Jewish community.
Yeah, no, it is. So I had I'm just going to tell a little snippet of a story here because I'm really interested in where we're going with this. We're going where I had hoped we'd go. But I had watched the first half hour of a 2.5-hour documentary on YouTube several years ago, and it is called, and I highly recommend that everybody watch this. It's called What the Royal Family Doesn't Want You to See. And it's really hard to find. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but I can only know. Well, I got to tell you my personal story about the Queen. But
oh yes, no, I totally want you to tell this. It is kind of like, it's unrelated to Black Lives Matter in a way, but I think it's actually related in the end. But yes, so let's definitely, we'll definitely get to that.
Tell me about your.
Yeah, so I watched this, I just, you know, it's something I was interested in, and I found it, and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of weird and cool, and I've never trusted the royal family at all. I think they just obviously are evil. So, but I watched the first half hour of this thing, and it scared me more than anything I have ever watched in my life. I was literally so scared. I for the first time in my life ever, and you might not realize this, but I've never been a conspiracy theorist until just recently. I literally was like, I can't like it. I have to like get out of here without leaving a trace, because if they know that I've seen it, then they're gonna come after me. It was like terrifying. And so I put that, I just was like, I don't think I can ever go back to that state of fear for years. And then the other day, with everything happening in the last, you know, in 2020, with just everything, I was like, you know, I kind of want to see what was in the rest of that. So I kind of gritted my teeth and I watched the rest of it. Well, it ends with the NWO, the New World Order stuff, and it's actually, I really think everybody needs to watch this. It's old and funky, and the timing's kind of off, and the video's kind of bad, but it's still really worth it.
All the better.
I mean, it really is. It's like, it kind of just nails it, and it exposes them. And but it ends on the New World Order thing. And you know, I've had some synchronicities around that. It was, you know, so I did another video about that. But so I think, you know, kind of what you kind of hinted at earlier was Soros was thinking, you know, like a one world government and that, and it almost sounds like he was really either part of the original NWO plan, or he was aligned with it, or maybe it's a Nazi thing. What do you think about that?
Well, okay, you have to understand that Nazism doesn't really actually arrive when most people think it arrives. Most people think Nazism arises out of the Weimar Republic, right? Nazism, Weimar Republic, that's the German republic that existed between World War I and 1933 when Hitler came to power.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was kind of, because the economy was so jacked up, it was always a very unstable government. The Nazi power, I mean, the Nazi party actually has its roots, its spiritual roots that go back to occult groups in the 1700s, okay? And they have this occult belief in the Aryan soul. And they believe that at the end of time, there will be a one world government, and that it will be run by people who are possessed by these spirits called the Vril, V-R-I-L, the Vril, and that these spirits live in the center of the earth, they believe. And they believe that the center of the earth is not this molten ball like we say it is. They believe that there's like water and an entire thing that looks like the earth inside the earth, and there are these Vril cities in there and all this like weird crazy horseshit, right? But the Nazi, like the Gestapo, like they were totally into this shit, right? And that's what they totally believed, and it was this demonic sort of thing. And they actually had a castle that, I mean, even as they were losing the war, Himmler was building this occultic castle for the SS in Germany, and they were trying to call up. They were having seances and spiritual kind of services, trying to call these spirits to indwell them, so that they wouldn't lose the war and that they would rule the world. And they were just into this crazy idea. But this whole idea of this one world government has been Lucifer's plan for a long, long time. Certainly that was the plan at the Tower of Babel, right? Didn't work out that way. That's the plan of Islam. Actually, Islam as a religion has a plan that it will be the geopolitical government for the entire earth. And that everyone who does not submit to Islam and the edicts of Islam will be assassinated or enslaved. So that's one other branch of that. And, you know, it's very interesting because, do you know who the Theosophists are?
A little bit, but I don't know much about what they do.
They're kind of this occult society, and they tried to blend Eastern and Western religion. And they had this guy who was one of their chief philosophers, and I'm forgetting his name, General Albert Pike. He's a general because he was a Confederate general, okay? And Albert Pike was the only person who was ever court-martialed for misconduct by the Confederate Army. And he was court-martialed for misconduct by the Confederate Army because troops under his command were carving occultic symbols into the dead bodies of Union soldiers. They were dismembering bodies and carving symbols into them under his training. Yeah, under his training. And so he was about to be executed when the South lost the war, and he got set free. And he went on to co-found the Freemasons and the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh my God.
And so you know the burning cross, right, that the Ku Klux Klan uses? See, he founded all the Ku Klux's rituals, all the weird terminology and all that crap. That's all from him, from Albert Pike. And Albert Pike, the burning cross was about bringing the light of Lucifer onto Christianity. It was a conquest of Satan over Jesus kind of thing, because Pike had this belief that Lucifer and Jesus were brothers, and that they were fighting for control over the universe, and that eventually, actually through Islam, he had this belief about there were going to be several world wars, and ultimately Islam was going to conquer the Western world, and that then Islam would be conquered by Satanism and would use the geopolitical government of Islam to rule the earth. Actually, Luciferianism, he didn't call it Satanism. And that was Pike's belief system.
Jesus.
And he wrote about that. I mean, you can find that. It's like not a secret.
Yeah, no, I've heard some, like some of this.
People try to pretend like, oh, that's not legitimate, but you know, there are books that he published with his name on them. He got royalties on that say that. So you know. Okay.
So Albert Pike, okay, so he was a Confederate, and I know that the Democrats have been linked to the Confederate Party, and
well, every Democrat, every single Confederate governmental official had been a Democrat governmental official in the United States.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. And so
the Confederacy was completely Democrat. The Democrat Party was the party of slavery. The Democrat Party is the party of the Ku Klux. You know, the Democrat Party fought every Civil Rights Act all the way to 1964. They did not fight the 1965 Act, but you know, they fought in 1956. They fought in 1948. They fought the 1931 Civil Rights Act. They fought 64. They finally relented in 1965 and signed up with the Republicans and like to pretend now that they were the champions of civil rights throughout American history, and nothing could be farther from the truth. They were absolute racial terrorists for the entirety of their existence.
That's like historical validation. I know that, you know, I mean, I don't have all the time in the world to look into all this stuff and get it all perfectly right. I just do the best I can, and I know we're all just doing the best we can. And you know, you've been around and seen some of this stuff and had good exposure to it.
I've been around a long time, dear.
And it's like, I know, and like, I mean, just you know, the topics we're talking about, you have a lot of experience with. But I think it's really valuable though to just keep reflecting back. And this is kind of my role whenever I do interviews. I think this is just the role that I take. I like this role. I think it's needed. Just kind of reflect back to, look at the behavior of the Democrat Party. Look at how they always, I mean, I go on, you know, I like grit my teeth and I follow, you know, Hillary, and I follow Obama, and I follow all these people, Newsom and everything. It's horrible. I don't want to read their tweets. They're awful people as far as I can tell, just from what they do and what they say. But then, you know, you get a chance to be part of that conversation, hopefully, and maybe somebody who's following them will see what you have to say, and maybe they'll think a little bit, like, what are you following these people for? They're literally just lying all the time. They're always saying really nasty stuff about Trump. They're projecting. You literally watch them do something, and then they'll turn around and they'll say that Trump did it. And you can just watch, you're like, wait, what? How are they still in office? Like, who is allowing this? And of course, we know it's part of this whole thing. You know, we have to stand up as a people.
No, there's a reason they call television programming.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing. I have a lot of black friends who are all of a sudden they're absolutely supporting Kamala Harris. I can't understand it. You know, she locked away more black men than any AG in California history. She deprived innocent men of release. She argued for ending the early release program so that it wouldn't hurt the contract labor corporations that were contracting with California prisons for prison labor. The very system that the South invented to re-enslave black people into slavery and into production in prisons in the South, she was an advocate for in California, and tried to keep people in jail as long as possible who were useful to prison industries. And for some reason, you know, I have black friends who think she's like the second coming of Jesus, and I'm like, she's the second coming of someone, but it ain't him.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it's the mainstream media, of course. They're just, you know, just all. I think a lot of people who still watch the news, you know, the mainstream news, they think that it's legitimate. They think, you know, this is the standard, this is accepted. On some level, they've accepted some sort of presumption that if it's on TV, then it must be the truth. This must be approved by whoever the authorities are who approve this and are looking out for my best interest, right? And it's like, oh God, no, couldn't be further from the truth. But, you know, and I agree with you. I think there are a lot of people who are awake. If you look at the Trump rallies, there's all these vote rallies and stuff. I mean, just huge numbers of people out there waving flags, showing their support. they see it, they understand, they're watching, and like you said, normal everyday people are watching this whole shit show, and like they're like, yeah, this isn't really cool with me, this is BS, you know. And they're not necessarily out there, you know, protesting or rioting, or you don't see them. You know, the silent majority is what.
Well, they're not going to have their car keyed by putting a Trump sticker on their car. They're not going to have their house firebombed by putting a Trump sign on their lawn, right? They're not going to have friends of theirs never speak to them again because they said, I'm thinking about voting for Donald Trump, right? They're not going to endure the level of social outcast that they would exist in if they have any kind of Democrat friends at all.
Yeah.
Because, you know, most people aren't prepped for that. Now, I've had a public life, so I'm used to that. It doesn't bother me. You know, you can call me all the names you want. I've been called all of them from every side. You know, I've been called an N-word lover and a racist both, so I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. But, you know, most people, you know, that's devastating to most people. Most people can't deal with that. They're not prepared to deal with that. It's extremely painful. So they just very quietly kind of like keep their head down. And then in November, they're going to go vote for Donald Trump. And everyone's going to be shocked. You know, he's going to get more of the vote this time than he got last time. Yeah. And people are going to freak out.
Yeah. And I think I really feel like, you know, it might not be the thing we're all admitting openly as a country, but I really see that Donald Trump is, and this is what was my journey. You know, I was always an environmentalist, an activist. I'm still an environmentalist. You know, I still sign NRDC petitions to Trump, and when they're suing him, I'm like, okay, you know, that makes sense, but I'm also going to support him in what he's trying to do. I don't think that he is necessarily like, you know, the same as everybody else in my lifetime. And I think we talked about this at coffee the other day, where in your lifetime too, we're not that different in age. So I'm not trying to, you know, I'm joking like that. You know, my humor is so dry, people sometimes don't get it. So I have to say that.
I go back to Eisenhower, so you know, that's long.
It's like, yeah, I mean, he's like the one who's kind of picking up where Kennedy left off. I mean, I looked at the actual evidence, and it wasn't 7 days after Kennedy said, you know, that there's a deep state and I'm going to take it down, that he was killed. It was actually a couple years or something like that. But he still gave the speech, and he still announced it publicly, and he was like, I intend to remove this. This is real, and it's ruining all of our lives. It's very scary and dangerous. And they took him out, you know, and Trump is basically the first person in my lifetime who's taken up that charge. And so I don't really see him as Republican or Democrat. I see him as like this like real person who stepped in and just been part of this movement of like, this is BS. We've had it. This is enough.
You know who the most courageous man in America is, and who I have nothing but admiration for, even though I disagree with him a lot?
Carol Flynn. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Robert Kennedy Jr.
Oh yeah, interesting. His name comes up a lot.
You know, they shot his father like a dog on TV after they shot his uncle. And that kid, he's older than I am, but he has gone out there and he has spoken up against the pharmaceutical establishment and spoken up for the environment, and at great peril to himself. And I think he is probably the most courageous man in American public life today. And you know, it's amazing, because I just start to cry every time I see him.
Oh.
Because of what he's been through.
Yeah.
Because you know, his father and his uncles, and he's you know, he's standing up too. And you know, I pray for that man all the time. You know, those of you who pray, he really needs your prayer.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of praying going on, and I take it seriously when they say you should pray. I'm like, okay. You know, one of the things Q said, you know what Q says, and it's often is, and most of all, pray. You know, it's like, I'm not religious, but I've prayed on my whole, I have a very strong relationship with like the creator, the great spirit, or whatever the heck it is out there that's, you know, engulfing all of us and lifting all of us and has created whatever the heck this is that we all are part of. And I take that seriously, because I do see the power of that. And, you know, what you said about Robert Kennedy Jr. inspired me to learn a little bit more about him, because I understand who he is and everything, but I haven't kind of dove in because I'm busy with everything I'm busy with. But I've heard his name come up quite often in the community of people on Twitter who follow Q and who are patriots and who are supporting what Trump's trying to do to stop this cabal. And so that's fascinating that you brought that up. And I think that's really, you tapped into the emotion that is really that really is it. this isn't about, you know, another 4-year election. That's one of the things Q said too, and I really agree with that. This is way bigger. This is our basic rights as a species, as a people.
Look, these crazy people, and I know we're getting far afield from Black Lives Matter here, but
Not really.
sort of not really.
I think it's related.
These crazy people want to dominate your life to the point that they're going to tell you what unproven drugs and vaccines they will force you to put into your body, or you can't participate in public life.
Yes, exactly. No, and you know, if you really kind of dive in, there's, you know, I'm sure we were all doing a ton of research in our own ways, like I said before, kind of with the form of activism we take. So I certainly don't claim to know everything, but what I've dug into, yeah, there's a very clear path laid out. Like if you look at Bill Gates, he's one of the proponents of, you know, and you saw, I mean, you saw
viruses off his own software.
Well, yeah, and like, yeah, it's just like, oh, gee, there's nothing to see here, folks, you know. But look at, you know, okay, COVID-19. And I do think this is all related to Black Lives Matter, and it's okay that it's not all totally about just that, because this is, they're an important point. I think we covered what I wanted to, but this is it's a big thing, and they're part of. But look at where COVID-19 originated. It was in a virology lab. You know, I mean, come on, people. You know.
Well, it's, you know, look, all these like CDC, all these like these labs that we have all over the world. They're all part of military establishments. They're all designing germ warfare, civilian population murder methods. They're all illegal. They're all against all the UN treaties, all the covenants. They're all against international law, and every major country has 1 or 2 or 5.
Yeah, and it's and I think
Fauci, his whole real job has nothing to do with saving us from COVID. His whole real job is inventing things like COVID to kill civilian populations in war. That's what this is all about. All these people who are involved in it, whether they're the Chinese ones or the British ones or the American ones or French or whatever, who are involved in their equivalents of the CDC in their countries, they're all war criminals. They're all designing diseases for civilian populations to be used in time of war. That's who they are.
This really reminds me of like Project Paperclip, and also what you had said before about, it really reminded me of Apt Pupil, which I don't know if you've seen it. It's a movie about a Nazi war criminal who gets sheltered in the United States. It's basically Project Paperclip. And this young boy comes under his tutelage, and he starts to become evil because of the influence. It's like he starts to become dark, and it's really, it nails it. It like really nails exactly what the danger is. But, you know, I mean, for those of you who don't know Project Paperclip, I mean, all these Nazi war criminals are guilty of crimes against humanity and genocide and really serious, scary torture and weird experiments on humans and all. I mean, just like the worst kind of people. They got brought over to the United States, and somebody was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's just bring them into our higher institutions of learning and science. Like the fact that, I think you were telling me something about this before, Steve, where there was, I might have brought this up, like, okay, who approved that? And didn't you say someone tried to knock it down, and maybe it was the president at the time or something, and then somebody like bigger, more powerful than him, like threatened him or said, I don't know who it was. Maybe it wasn't you. You're looking like
it wasn't me. I'm confused on this one, but that sounds interesting.
Well, because I mean, if you think about it, it's a legitimate question. Who in their right mind would look at that on the surface and be like, that's a good idea? I mean, I get that they had technology, and I get it. Well,
you know, they did a lot of experiments that no one else could do. Like almost all of our knowledge about how hypothermia works, right? Almost all of that comes from experiments Dr. Mengele did. And the United States Air Force basically took all of his research and basically did a couple other milder lawful studies. And they've pretty much published most of what we know about hyperthermia comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And it was, they probably were faced with a decision of like, well, what do we do? You know, they have all this information and we could benefit from, but like how, you know, the moral, and like, I just want to say, I think the point, I haven't heard other people discuss it. Maybe it probably has been discussed, but I haven't heard it yet. And it's like, wasn't there another way of doing it? Couldn't they have been kept in some kind of detainment? I mean, they were war criminals. Like, why weren't they imprisoned? Why couldn't they work from jail? know what I mean? Like, so that just, it's like,
You're
okay.
asking the wrong person because, you know.
Well, it's a rhetorical question. It's not really a real question because obviously, you know, something was going on there. Like somebody was like, yeah, let's, this is part of our plan. You know, I don't know, like.
You know, we and the Russians were in competition to get the best Nazi scientists.
Yeah. And so we were probably like the Cold War fear that,
Or
you know,
was
like
sort of beginning already.
ahead
Even
of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I want to bring it back to Black Lives Matter because you did bring up like we're straying off topic. I really don't think we are. I think Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and I'm so glad you linked to them. That was really, really well said. They are a part of a much larger agenda. They are, you know, the Antifa group, they're the militarized foot soldier arm of a tentacled octopus with multiple other arms, right? And Soros might be at the head of it, you know, maybe he's part of the head. I don't think he's I absolutely have no doubt
he's got, there's something behind him and there's something
he's not
behind
the
that.
top yet. No. He's just a puppet of a much bigger master, and like you said,
right.
And it's, yeah. But Black Lives Matter absolutely fits into this, and I think that this conversation has really been good in providing some historical context. But I really mostly wanted to, you know, have people hear your story about how you went to this Board of Supervisors meeting for the County of LA, and as everyone knows, LA is gigantic, right? That's a lot of people that this affects.
Bigger than most European countries.
A group of people came in there, funded by George Soros, which we've now had some good history on in this conversation, and they were successful in lobbying the board to defund the sheriff for LA County, the entire county.
You cannot believe how much the Board of Supervisors meeting, you know, I've been going to Board of Supervisors meetings on and off for 32 years now. You cannot believe how much they've changed in the last 4 years. They've become completely dominated by the not-for-profit industrial complex. Okay, Black Lives Matter is one of the groups. LASA, which is a homeless thing, is one of the major groups. And when I go to a board meeting now, right, there'll be like 600 people there, and they'll all be sitting behind various not-for-profit groups, and the same like 10 or 15 people will speak at every meeting. And most of them are from our executive directors of these not-for-profit groups, and they have people shaking signs, you know. And so if you go to a Board of Supervisors meeting, if you're the board who, you know, elected officials are sort of like mushrooms, right? They're kept in the dark and fed bullshit. All they see when they go to their meeting is there's like hundreds of people, right? And no matter what their not-for-profit is, they're all sort of funded by these left, same like 5 or 6 foundations, right? And they all agree on every single issue. And so like the Black Lives Matter people will be there to speak on their Black Lives Matter issue, but LASA will have an issue, and like a bunch of the people from Black Lives Matter will speak, a bunch of the people from the ecumenical group that always comes and speaks. And it almost looks like a scene out of Bonfires of the Vanities now. I mean, it's really crazy what's going on in these things. I mean, they're, you know, I remember about 4 years ago, the first time I went after the board changed from being sort of split between Republicans and Democrats to being like 4 Democrats and 1 Republican, right? And somehow that empowered this whole not-for-profit industry to show up. And it's crazy. I mean, it really looks like a 1930s movie of the French Revolution. There's like all the sense of decorum is gone, all the sense of kind of, you know, respect and order is gone. I mean, you know, I used to go to the Board of Supervisors and I would get like pretty cranked up, right? But I would still always I would always show up in a suit. I would always, you know, address people by their proper titles. I would show some decorum and respect because it's a democratic venue, right?
Yeah.
That's just totally gone. And it's crazy. I mean, people really need to go down, you know, since well, you can't really go down now because it's all done by internet, but when COVID's over, you need to go down to a Board of Supervisors meeting. Take a day off of work. Really, I'm sorry, but take a day off. Go down at 9. And watch what happens and how these decisions that affect your life that you know nothing about are being made.
Well, and I want to address that right there. Elucidates a huge conundrum that is, in my opinion, totally intended. It is part of the agenda. We've got us all overly busy.
That they meet at 9 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays, right?
They've got it. Yeah, they've got it. We do not. People don't have time or attention span. They're numbed down by TV. They're tired. They're worn down by the commute, the drive, the environment at work, the whole thing. So that they're not going to even think that they don't even care that there is a meeting. They don't even know what it. And yet they, So I think we actually either need to, this administration or the next one needs to address, like, maybe looking at how we handle this. Ties into corporate personhood really strongly, where corporations, they always were funding people, but now they're like legally allowed to totally act like, and they get protections like a natural person gets, which is completely nuts.
Or beyond that. Or beyond that, because after all, they have eternal life.
Yeah. No, so I think that it's like the way that the law is, it's easily manipulated, because I don't think whoever set the law really saw that this would happen, that there would be this move. Like you said, this is just, these people are like, they're vicious. They want to totally dominate. And so it's like Monsanto. It's exactly what Monsanto did to all those organic farmers when they had the Roundup Ready GMO seeds.
The Roundup went and raped all their plants.
Yes, the pollen drifted onto the organic farms, and then the organic farmers got sued by Monsanto's army of lawyers for quote unquote stealing their GMO technology patent. And then they got put out of it. Are you kidding? Like, whoever was sitting on the, and who was? Well, of course, it was Clarence Thomas, who used to work for Monsanto. So, but this is the same kind of thing on a smaller level, perhaps, but it's not small. It affects all of LA County. We're going to lose funding for our sheriff's department. Whoa. At the same time that Gavin Newsom is releasing prisoners. What?
And I've always been a critic of the sheriff's department because they do not enforce the law constitutionally. And they do enforce the law with racial disparity. They do not, like, one of the reasons I enjoy living in Altadena is I modify my own cars. And I can drive anything with any kind of exhaust system I want to as a white guy in Altadena. The cops will not mess with me. My black friends cannot say the same thing. I have a very good friend who's an electrician. He drives nice cars, very quiet cars, sedate but nice. He gets hassled by the cops all the time because he's driving while black.
Well, my friend Reese does. He drives while black and he gets pulled over all the time. And it's like, come on. The car is kind of, it's a standout car. It's white. It's got these like really dark, tinted windows, and it's a lowrider, but like, come on. I was in the car one time and they pulled him over for nothing.
Well, you've seen my 41 Lincoln.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Driving while black is, it's always been a thing. But
And that's outrageous. That shit needs to stop. And I don't think, I think white people in general have gotten to the point in America where they sort of really do understand that this is going on. And I don't think there's any support for it, really. I think if we had a moderate, more libertarian-leaning group as opposed to a communist group, and if it was across racial lines, I think this shit would end pretty fast.
Yeah, and this is, okay, so you just kind of opened the door for me to say this. I think this is really important. I definitely think we've been pitted against each other. And again, this is one of the traits of the psychopath, the demon.
Right.
They take a little key, a nugget of truth so that you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I see that is the truth. And then they add all this other stuff that is not true, that's really scary and bad and against you. But you're gonna still take it because it's got that little grain of truth. And that's what the media does. They spin stuff, etc. So this is what they're doing. And this is perfect. I'm glad we got to this place, because I think this is the nugget of it, really, where there is some truth. Of course, I don't want to have racism. I think it's abhorrent. I will stand up for any person of color who's being talked. Anybody, they don't have to be of color. I'll just stand up in a room and I'll, like, I've always done that. But that's not what this is about. This is something that's been hijacked by a scary, dark bigger force, and that's pitted the legitimate argument against racism and unfair treatment and corruption in the police and sheriff and everywhere. But the thing is, that force is that is the source of the corruption. That is and what it's done is it has turned us against each other so that we will not look at the man behind the curtain and take it out. And that's what pisses me off so much. And I love that I'm just really glad that we got to that it came to that. That's really the point I was hoping that we could really explore.
Yeah.
So, wow, I feel like I've exhausted all my questions and I am complete.
I didn't tell you the story. We skipped over it about the Queen.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you if you had anything else. Let's end on her because she is so evil.
Well, first of all, you got to understand, if you're really an American, you've read Tom Paine. Probably most people haven't. You really need to.
How do you spell his last name?
E-A-I-N-E, Tom Paine. Tom Paine was really the philosophical founder of the American Revolution. Now, when you read Tom Paine today, a lot of what he says, you just kind of go like, well, yeah, of course, but it was really radical in his time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Tom says in defending the concept of the American Revolution is that royalty is the delusion of brutes.
Yeah.
Okay? Thugs, basically.
Yeah.
And royalty is, and so is aristocracy, and so is the right to control other people's lives. So is the administrative state. It's the delusion of brutes. But anyway, I used to be, when I was young, I fell in love with English sports cars, and I had a bunch of English sports cars. And you always have to have more than one when you have an English sports car because the damn things never run. But anyway, so I had like Triumphs. I had TR3s. I became an Anglophile, and I had my own Sherlock Holmes outfit, I drove my little antique English car in. And the Queen, in about 1981, Queen Elizabeth was coming to Southern California. And she was going to go to this place in Sierra Madre that was some British retirement home, right? So I kind of like called in sick that day and hung around on the street to wait for the Queen to go by, catch a glimpse of the Queen. First thing I noticed is there were like tons of highway patrol officers in these super fancy uniforms that I'd never seen before and I've never seen since, guarding the Queen. And then I'm standing on the sidewalk and I'm looking as she's going by, and her eyes and my eyes meet each other as she's going by. I have never been so frightened in my life.
Yeah.
There was this cold, lizard-like look in her eyes that at the same time I saw the fires of hell in. And I mean, now, before this, like in the 1970s, see, I am old, I had like done street witnessing in Hollywood Boulevard. I had met disciples of Charles Manson. I had met Satanists. I had met pimps who threatened to kill me. I had never seen anything in anyone's eyes that frightened me and chilled me to the marrow of my bones, like the evil that was in Queen Elizabeth's eye.
Yeah, and so, okay, I loved when you told me that story, and I remember, so you guys, I don't think I mentioned this, but when Steve first told me this story, we were just talking, and I was like, oh my God, I want to record you saying this story because people need to know. And this is another example of direct personal experience that someone had, where we can do all this research and listen to these people talk who are famous, but then there's people, and if you've happened to have some kind of direct experience, it's so valuable. I really, really value it personally. I've had a lot of direct experience myself too, and that blows my mind. And you're using the same language as I used to describe the documentary about the royal family, that what the royal family doesn't want you to see. Like, it's exactly the feeling, and I'm sure I could never, and I don't ever want to like look her in the eye and feel that quite that level. Because I mean, like, that's the exact feeling I had though. I was watching a video on YouTube that was posted by somebody else, not had anything to do with them. And I was so terrified that I suddenly, it's the first time in my life I've ever felt like someone's watching me. I've got to back out. I can't touch the doorknob. Like, just get out. Don't leave a trace, because they'll come after you because you know about them.
You know, it was weird. They had something on the British royal family, and I sort of like I was changing channels, and I saw it, and like one of her grandkids was reciting scripture, right? Like some Bible verse that kids learn. I don't even remember which one it was, but that kid, he was reciting it, but he was so full of hatred while he was saying it. I was like, okay, that's like scary, right? I mean,
Yeah.
usually you think, you know, when some kid is reciting a Bible verse, that kind of gives you like a little happy pink fuzzy in your soul, right? And
Yeah.
this, you know, it was like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So it was like one of those Psalms, right? This kid's quoting that, and you're just like going, oh, I've got that chill to the marrow of my bones feeling again.
Yeah, and I won't go there because that's not the topic tonight, but I will just mention, you know, one of the things that really stood out to me about the Q movement, I only discovered it like maybe a year ago, and it corroborates the thesis of my book. It's become one of the source, you know, materials for, you know, the research that I've compiled after writing the premise of the book down, because it corroborates it. But you know, Q is saying that basically the quote unquote conspiracy theory is, I mean, what Q is all about exposing is this international ring of child abusers. I mean, it's like, if you really think, you know, I would have thought it would
You know,
be
that's
something
not
like,
what you think it's about. Most people think it's about sex, right? It's not about sex. It's about power exchange, and it's
yeah,
about the defiling of the innocent.
yeah, and it's
And
about
that's
the fear vibration and
right.
you know, it's a whole
Right.
thing. And I don't know if you've ever, I would encourage people to look into Diana as well. There's some good documentaries out there about her. I had talked about a really, really weird synchronicity I had a week before she died. It just blew my mind. It was one of those things where it's like, you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, but you know that you're supposed to be paying attention.
Mhm.
And so I have paid attention to her because of that really very spiritual, weird experience I had around her. And, you know, she said some things about the Queen and Charles that will stop you cold. And it's funny that you use the word lizard-like, because that's what Diana was saying as well.
Well, and you know, it's really weird because there was this guy who I sort of, he did this tour in Los Angeles, and he did it about a year before I saw the Queen. So maybe 1980, right? And there were these posters all over the place. David Icke speaks, you know?
David, yeah.
And it was like, David Icke speaks on the lizard people running the earth, right? And I thought, oh man, who is this fruit job, right? This guy's like a complete total nutcase, right?
Yeah.
And then I see the Queen, and I look at her like eye to eye, and I go, ooh, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if I don't think it's like that she's a physical lizard. I think that, you know, she's got a satanic, demonic spirit that's indwelled her.
Yeah. And
Because
I
I
know
don't, you know, lizard
one of the
alien
things
thing.
that Q says is that, you know, how many coincidences until you realize it's not a coincidence anymore. And that's all I'm here to really do at this stage. When I bring out the book, it'll all be revealed or whatever. But, you know, at this stage, I'm wanting to kind of just point to things, and I just, you know, so that's it. There's no really like assumption or like this is what this is. It's more like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
David, and when you actually listen to David Icke, I had heard about him for years, never listened to him for many, many years, and I only like heard a couple of his talks. But when I finally listened to him, which is probably like last year, I was like, oh, this guy makes perfect sense. He's totally lucid. He makes his point clearly, calmly. He's very intelligent. He, you know, it's like, oh, okay, all the things I'd heard about him being a wackadoo, that doesn't really fit with his actual presentation.
That's funny because I never actually like listened to David Icke or Icke until 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like all the way from 1980 till 2 years ago. I like never listened to the guy. You know, I was so shocked when he like showed back up on the internet, and I was like, yeah, okay, well that's the guy with the lizards, whatever.
Yeah.
I finally like listened to him, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah.
And like you said, I mean, it's like a demonic energy and we know for a fact that the pedo thing is a satanic. It's satanic. It's related to a satanic cult.
Yeah.
Well, what they're doing to people, and this goes kind of full circle all the way back to Obamagate and the whole thing. Hillary just got her appeal, which blows my mind. But of course, there's still swamp creatures in the deep state swamp still in positions of authority. So they gave her appeal, so she doesn't have to testify. But we've got.
If you were Hillary Clinton and you were completely innocent of all this crap, wouldn't you want to testify and set the record straight?
Oh my God, right?
Get it over with? Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, no. There's and this is kind of like, I don't know. I probably want to end soon because I don't want to make people like, overwhelm people. I know my shows tend to go long, but it's fun, right? It's good stuff, right? So, but there was this. I don't know if you've heard of the Wiener laptop, but it was a kill switch that Anthony Weiner, who was Aberdeen. I can't think of her first name for some reason.
Huma Aberdeen.
Yeah, Huma Aberdeen, which was she was Hillary's main
personal assistant.
Yeah, personal assistant, like right arm.
Still is her personal assistant.
Person, and so he had a kill switch, which was, if you don't know, it's a record of all this stuff. It will be released if you are killed, or because so that you can stay alive because you know too much, right? These people are constantly getting threatened with all kinds of horrible stuff, and so it was confiscated, and of 10 seasoned detectives, and this is coming from Cindy Powell, who is General Flynn's attorney. She said, I listened to her say this, it was really compelling. She said, the men who went and looked at what was on this laptop, they are seasoned detectives, and they went outside and they had to throw up. It was that bad. Yeah. And guess what, though? Like, I think there's only 3 of the 10 left alive at this point, and that wasn't.
9 of the 12 people who saw the laptop are dead.
Oh, 9 now.
One of the detectives is one of the detectives is alive. Okay.
Good grief.
And he is alive, and Huma's alive. Everyone else is dead. Everyone else who's seen the contents of the computer is dead.
Yeah, and so this is what the kind of thing, and I was just listening to a really good show called the X-22 Report. Just I think it was this morning. I was listening to last night's episode, and Dave, the guy who does the show, he was going back to a Q post where Q, and I had seen this, but I had forgotten about it because Q hasn't dropped in a little while. But it was about, we haven't actually dropped the really real stuff yet to you. We have not dropped the crimes against humanity and the child trafficking stuff to you yet, because it's going to be frankly too much for most people. Most people are not going to be able to handle this at all. They won't want to see it. It'd be like PETA times 900. You don't, like, you want to save the animals, but like you can't physically stomach the horror of what's being done to them. This is being done to kids, and so that's what Q is telling us. And Q, just for the record, so if people who are tuning in haven't watched some of the other shows that I've done, Q is basically, we're not exactly totally sure who Q is, but I think that the best description I've heard from a documentary I saw, and also from one of the people I've interviewed, Chris Landrath, he's a researcher who's been with Q from the beginning, or been investigating or reading Q from the beginning, I should say. It's a group of people within the NSA, so they have access to the highest level of military intelligence in the United States military, and they had access to when the Patriot Act was dropped on us after 9/11, or by way of 9/11, so that we would all be surveilled. Well, guess what? The pedophiles and the evil deep state, deep swamp creatures were also surveilled, and so the NSA has everything. They've got all the records proving that what they've done. And so that's.
I bet Adam Schiff didn't think about that when he wrote the legislation.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. So that's another thing. One of the hashtags is "these people are stupid," and I'm constantly like, are they trying to lose? Did you know that Kamala Harris isn't constitutionally eligible to become president?
No, that's not true.
Legally can't?
No, sure? That's not true. Yeah, I'm sure. Look, here's the deal with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris's parents were legally in the United States on green cards, okay? But they were under the authority of the United States, okay? Kamala was born of people who were under the authority of the United States and under our jurisdiction in Oakland in, 1964? So her parents were here legally. They were under the jurisdiction of the United States. She was born here. She's legally eligible to be vice president and president. That whole thing is like, her parents aren't natural born Americans. That's bullshit. I don't know who thought that talking point out, but it's totally erroneous.
Well, this is a call out to all the Q researchers. please dig, because I want to know now. I'm like, is that, hi? I think that's a sign. I think that is a sign that we've reached the point where people are hungry. And
Yes.
but okay, so I just want to say thank you. This has been a really fantastic interview, and I have to say it's been really fun. I think it's been one of the funnest I've done. And thank you for sharing all your stories about all this cool stuff. And maybe we'll have to have you back for even more stories in the future, because you've got a lot of them.
Well, you're welcome, and certainly, you want me back for the story of how I met Ed Teskey, and then you want to tie that right into my friend Steve Hodel, who's got a story about how he discovered how his father was the Black Dahlia murderer. That's very interesting because it touches on sort of like sexual corruption covering for murderers in the 1940s in Los Angeles. So we know it goes back at least that far. And then when you also talk to me about my years in Hollywood, I can tell you about a little bit about the Wineville murders.
I definitely want to do an interview about your time in Hollywood, because there's a lot of stuff going on around Hollywood stuff. They call it pedowood, and so yeah,
well,
I think
yeah.
people would really like to watch that. I think that again, just having these individuals who just happen to have the history of having been involved and knowing these people and been there when it was happening, it's so valuable to all of us. So I will let you go to your wife and have dinner. and I'll I look forward to talking with you again. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening.
You're welcome.